Well, welcome to the Oakmont Symposium on Wednesday afternoon this time. We are delighted to have Mark Randol as our speaker. Mark not only is a well-known person here in Oakmont, but in the old days, he actually, when he worked for a living, was nationally recognized for his work in the area of anti-terrorism. We've asked him to take a real look at this cybersecurity problem that occurred in December. Before I lose people, let me just give you two other thoughts. We're going to do all of our Q&A today by way of the chat. So you'll need to input your, either that you want to give a question to the chat, or actually you can type your question, and we'll do the questions and answers at the end. And the other thing is this coming Sunday, when the Sunday Symposium meets on its regular 10:30 time, we're going to be having two speakers, Darren Lachelle, who is the CEO for the KRCB local PBS station, which is growing as it has now acquired a station down in the peninsula, and Raleigh Atkinson, who is the owner of the Sonoma West publishers. They're going to be talking about local media in this modern world. Well, with that in mind, Mark, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, George. Welcome, everyone. FireEye is a cybersecurity company that investigates cyber attacks, protects against malicious software, and analyzes IT security risks. Over the years, it's been called in to investigate some of the most high-profile breaches in governments and organizations. But compared to others in Silicon Valley, it is a smallish technology firm. FireEye would have continued to labor quietly in the fast-paced world of high tech, except that early last month, an engineer at Mandiant, the incident response arm of FireEye, detected a suspicious attempt to enroll a device into the company's multi-factor authentication solution. Mandiant's subsequent investigation of this attempted intrusion led them to a product made by a company that develops software for businesses to help manage their networks, systems, and IT infrastructure. That company's name is Solarwinds. The network management software product they make is called Orion, which helps keep computer networks up and running. The software is foundational to most businesses. It's in the plumbing, as one industry executive described it. Orion is used by over 300,000 customers, including several government agencies and Fortune 500 companies. It is regularly updated and sent out to SolarWinds customers, who then upload it to their networks. At first, FireEye could not identify anything specifically wrong with the Orion software, but it was their only lead on how their network was compromised. So they put over 100 of their engineers on the case. They went through 14 gigabytes of information and over 18,000 files in the latest Orion update from SolarWinds, a total of 4,000 executable files. It was then that they found that an attacker had targeted and accessed certain red team assessment tools that FireEye uses to test its customers' security. After poring over 50,000 lines of code, they finally discovered the malware in SolarWinds Orion software. FireEye's discovery and the subsequent government and private sector-wide investigation revealed the following. Sometime before March 2020, hackers working for the SVR, that's Russia's foreign intelligence agency, hacked into SolarWinds and slipped a Trojan horse, or backdoor, into an Orion software update. Thousands of users who downloaded and installed that corrupted update between March and June of 2020 unwittingly gave SVR hackers access to their networks. This allowed the SVR to covertly maneuver around the compromised networks, steal data, access emails, download software, and perform reconnaissance. They were also able, in some cases, to forge computer credentials to gain wider access across networks and steal protected data stored on in-house servers and cloud data centers. It was just this hacking technique, forging computer credentials, that was detected by FireEye on its own network and led to the discovery of this cybersecurity catastrophe. According to US Homeland Security Advisor, the former Homeland Security Advisor, Tom Bossert, the magnitude of this national security breach is hard to overstate. The actual or perceived control of so many networks could easily be used to undermine public and consumer trust in data, written communications, and services. In the networks the Russians control, they have the power to destroy or alter data and impersonate legitimate people. Utah Senator Mitt Romney declared bluntly, "A cyber attack of this nature is really the modern equivalent of Russian bombers reportedly flying undetected over the entire country." This afternoon, I wish to shed light on this massive cybersecurity breach. I'm going to make a go at addressing these questions. How did the breach happen? What went wrong? Who was compromised? And what can we do about it? So let's start with how the breach happened. A commonly used method to hack into a network is one shown in this diagram here. It's called a spear phishing attack. This is where a hacker uses social engineering or other techniques to induce an unwitting user to open a corrupted attachment to an email, which then releases malware into the targeted network. Now, if you take a look at this somewhat busy slide, let's look at the middle there, the so-called neutral space. The operational infrastructure, of course, is just those people who are your adversary who've developed some emails or something. They craft an email with a malicious link, if you look at the arrows at the top of the slide, and then moving to the right, they send it to a recipient. Now, the recipient clicks on the link and enters their credentials. So for example, if you get a message that you think is from Wells Fargo asking you to change your password or to enter your password of your account, when you do that, it actually is sending that information, as the arrow shows you, back through to the adversary. Then what they do is they take your credentials, which they've accessed, as we go to the third arrow, and they access their targeted system, which might be your bank account or the bank itself. And then they can either add malicious files or they can just gather information which they exfiltrate back out again. So this is what a spear phishing attack looks like. An example of this attack is the Russian hack of the Democratic National Committee in 2016. As you may recall, in March of that year, an email that had the appearance of a Google security alert was sent to John Podesta, then the chairman of Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign. Now, this slide shows a copy of an identical email that was sent to several DNC staffers, including Clinton's campaign chairman. So I'll give you a chance to look at that. So that looks fairly authentic, and this kind of an email has tricked many, many people. When you click on change password, you've now let the bad guys into the system. Podesta asked his IT staff whether it was safe to open the email attachment. His IT staff, in their reply, shown in the slide here, the staffer inadvertently stated that the email was legitimate. But later he insisted that he had intended to say illegitimate. If you read this email in context, it appears to support his explanation. But Podesta clicked on the email attachment because it said it was legitimate. And he did so that he would follow the other instructions in the email, which was to change his password. But instead, of course, this launched malware from a hacking group working for the Russian government, given the code named APT-128, or Advanced Persistent Threat 128, which goes by the colloquial name Fancy Bear. The malware gave the Russians access to Podesta's emails, some of which may or may not have been subsequently doctored, and they then provided these to WikiLeaks, who leaked them publicly to the embarrassment of the Democratic Party and Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign. Last year's hack of Solarwinds was a different type of attack. Russia's SVR hackers are believed to be part of the group APT-129, or Cozy Bear. They exploited the way software companies distribute updates by covertly adding malware to a legitimate software package. This gave the hackers a backdoor, a foothold in their targets' computer networks. This is known as a supply chain attack because it targets a supplier to an organization rather than an organization itself, and thus can affect all of a supplier's customers. In October 2019, Cozy Bear did an innocuous addition of code inside an Orion software update and saw that it was deployed. At that point, they knew their techniques to hack into Solarwinds' supply chain were efficient and effective. They went live with the actual malicious code inside of the Orion product in March through June of last year. It has not been conclusively determined how the Russian SVR hackers broke into Solarwinds' Orion software. According to a January 6th article in the New York Times, officials are investigating whether JetBrains, a company that makes tools for software developers, was breached. Excuse me. JetBrains was founded by 3 Russian engineers in the Czech Republic and has research labs in Russia. The exact product investigators are examining is TeamCity, which allows developers to test and exchange software code before it's released. By compromising TeamCity, cybersecurity experts say that Russian hackers could have planted backdoors into the clients of JetBrains, which included Solarwinds. Following the New York Times disclosures, JetBrains CEO Maxim Shafarov released a statement saying, JetBrains has not taken part or been involved in this attack in any way. Solarwinds is one of our customers and uses TeamCity, which is a complex product that requires proper configuration. If TeamCity has somehow been used in this process, it could very well be to misconfiguration and not a specific vulnerability. How about that for an explanation? So what went wrong? The supply chain is just one factor in this massive breach of US government and private sector networks. As we learn more about Solarwinds, whose product was used as a vector for the Russian hack, the more questions are being asked about its security practices and cultures. Former employees and advisors have told the New York Times that Solarwinds was a ripe target for attack. The company's CEO, Kevin Thompson, is not a software engineer or computer scientist. He's an accountant and former chief financial officer. He ordered every aspect of the business examined for cost savings, and important security practices were eliminated because of the expense. He outsourced much of the company's engineering to offices in the Czech Republic, Poland, and Belarus, where Russian intelligence has considerable experience and active intelligence operations. Internal emails showed that passwords of SolarWinds employees were leaking out last year on GitHub, a site where software developers share information with one another. And also last year, a researcher informed the company that he had uncovered the password to SolarWinds' update mechanism, the vehicle through which its customers were compromised. The password was SolarWinds123, all lowercase. Still, the security deficiencies at SolarWinds should not obscure the fact that the SVR hackers used extraordinarily stealthy tradecraft. They went to great lengths to cover their tracks. They used American internet addresses, allowing them to appear to conduct attacks in the very city in which victims were based. They created special bits of code intended to avoid detection, and they timed their intrusions during working hours, for example, not to raise suspicions. So why didn't the US government cybersecurity specialists detect the hack? Some years ago, the US Computer Emergency Readiness Team developed an intrusion detection system named Einstein that monitors the network gateways of US government departments and agencies for unauthorized traffic and to detect malicious network activity. Einstein is operated by the Department of Homeland Security's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA. The problem is that Einstein reacts only to known malware or suspicious behaviors that the system is educated to detect. It was not equipped to find novel malware or internet connections or detect threats delivered through newly written malicious code communicating to servers not previously affiliated with known cyber attacks. Unfortunately, that is exactly one of the techniques employed by Cozy Bear. This shortcoming in the latest version of Einstein was noted in a GAO report in 2018, but the Trump administration took no action on the recommendations in the report. It was also during this time that the White House lacked a cybersecurity coordinator because the former president had eliminated the post. When the breach was discovered in 2020, the US also lacked a permanent director of CISA, who is the nation's top cybersecurity official. This is because Trump had fired the incumbent, Chris Krebs. CISA had no deputy director either because Trump had forced him out too. Finally, DHS, which manages CISA, lacked a Senate-confirmed secretary, deputy secretary, general counsel, undersecretary for intelligence and analysis, and undersecretary for management. At the risk of further speaking ill of the departed, when informed of the breach, Trump tweeted, "The cyber hack is far greater in the fake news media than in actuality. I have been fully briefed and the situation is well under control." After then Secretary of State Mike Pompeo publicly endorsed the consensus view of cyber experts and the intelligence community that Russia was responsible for the breach, Trump contradicted him with the stunning allegation, without any evidence, that the true culprit may be China. So who was compromised during this breach? The Russians gained access to the unclassified networks of hundreds of US government departments and agencies, including the Departments of State, Justice, Treasury, Homeland Security, Commerce and Energy, the National Institutes of Health, Los Alamos and Sandia National Labs, and the National Nuclear Security Administration, which maintains the nation's nuclear stockpile. The breadth of the breach is staggering. The victim list includes the accounting company Deloitte, the California Department of State Hospitals, Kent State University, 3 state governments, and ironically, the city of Austin, Texas, where the headquarters of Solarwinds is located. Intrusions were also detected at several technology companies. These include Cisco Systems, the gigantic developer and producer of network hardware, software, and telecommunications equipment, the chip makers Intel and NVIDIA, the computing software maker VMware, and Belkin International, which sells Wi-Fi routers and networking gear, such as the popular Linksys brand. Perhaps the Russian intelligence agency's biggest prize was Microsoft, which claims to have detected the backdoor in its, quote, environment, unquote, and had, quote, isolated and removed it, unquote. In a blog post, Microsoft identified more than 40 of its customers who had been targeted more precisely and were compromised. These included security and other technology firms, think tanks, and government contractors and agencies. Most companies are loath to publicly acknowledge hostile intrusions into their networks or other cybersecurity failures. It undermines customer confidence in their products and erodes investor confidence in the value of their stock. Microsoft is no different. But a few weeks after its initial blog post, Microsoft had to publicly acknowledge that some of its cloud customers were also breached through a third-party partner that handles its cloud access services. In addition, the Russians may have penetrated deeper into Microsoft's systems than previously known. In another blog post, Microsoft reported, quote, "We detected unusual activity with a small number of internal accounts, and upon review, we discovered one account had been used to view source code in a number of source code repositories," unquote. Let's dive deeper into that opaque press release. Source code is the underlying set of instructions that run a piece of software or operating system. It is typically one of a company's most closely guarded secrets. Having access to the source code gives hackers the blueprint to how the software was created and makes it easier for them to uncover new vulnerabilities. If you have the blueprint, it is easier to engineer attacks. If Russia got access to Microsoft's source code, as it appears to have done, then that is huge. What might the Russians do with all this information they've exfiltrated through their breach of US government systems? From the State Department, they might learn of policymaker plans with respect to regions and issues that affect Russia's strategic interests. From the Treasury Department, they might learn about market-moving economic decisions, communications with the Federal Reserve, and economic sanctions against Russian officials and others. Blackstart describes the processes and advanced electronic control mechanisms needed to effectively recover from a catastrophic cyber attack on the nation's power grid. Cozy Bear's penetration of the Department of Energy may allow Russia to learn about this system and how to disrupt it. From their access to NIH, the SVR may be able to steal important scientific information related to the production of the coronavirus vaccine. And very significantly, an examination of the emails of US government officials or access to their home Wi-Fi through backdoors and commercial routers could reveal compromising information that would give Russian intelligence officers opportunity to blackmail those officials. Now, I don't know about you, but thank God I have a Netgear router. But who knows, maybe the Russians have hacked that brand too. So what can we do about it? Let's start by asking, what was this hack exactly? Was it cyber espionage or a cyber attack? Espionage is an accepted part of international statecraft to which states respond with arrests, diplomacy, and counterintelligence activities. By contrast, a cyber attack has international and domestic legal ramifications and could allow a state to respond with force. Accurately characterizing the hack is an important issue because it will determine what options the United States has to address the breach. The way Microsoft President Brad Smith sees it, this latest cyber assault is effectively an attack on the United States and its government and critical institutions, including security firms. While this is a security failure of enormous proportions, it is not, as Senator Dick Durbin said, virtually a declaration of war by Russia on the United States. The reason is that countries spy on each other all the time. In that sense, Russia's actions are no different than what the United States tries to do against its adversaries every day. We should not forget that the United States has by far the most extensive and aggressive intelligence operations in the world. Our National Security Agency, NSA, collects and analyzes signals intelligence, the same type of intelligence activity that was undertaken by Russia's SVR in this hack. NSA's budget is the largest of any US intelligence agency. It aggressively leverages America's position controlling most of the world's internet backbone and the home base of most internet providers. Among the millions of NSA documents stolen by Edward Snowden in 2014 and leaked to journalists was the disclosure that NSA's targets included 193 countries, friends and adversaries alike, as the intercept of the cell phone communications of German Chancellor Angela Merkel attests. NSA also targets international organizations such as the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and the International Atomic Energy Agency. Right now, we are almost certainly running offensive operations against Russia. In 2016, President Obama boasted that we have more capacity than anybody, both offensively and defensively. Well, maybe offensively. If the Russian SVR hack is not a declaration of war, was it an attack? There are not always bright lines between intelligence operations designed to collect information and those that are designed to do damage or destruction. The latter manifest themselves in the physical world, such as shutting down a power grid, disabling a factory, oil pipeline, or sewage treatment plant, leading to the leak of toxic substances into rivers or streams. These are considered attacks. But if the objective is to gather information about the intentions of one's adversary, read emails, collect data about government organizations, then that is espionage. Examples of cyber attacks include, in 2010, the Stuxnet Attack, which damaged Iranian centrifuges used to enrich uranium. It was reported to be a joint operation of the United States and Israel. In 2014, North Korea hacked the network of Sony Pictures, which allowed them to destroy data and release to the public private emails, which proved to be embarrassing and costly to Sony. On 2 occasions in 2015 and 16, Russian hackers took control of portions of Ukraine's power grid and shut off the power to hundreds of thousands of customers in Kiev and surrounding region. In 2017, Iran deployed its Shamoon virus to attack the computer hard drives of Saudi Arabia's National Industrialization Company and Sidara Chemical Company, wiping out all the data they contained. In addition, safety controllers at company sites, which regulate voltage, temperature, and pressure, were also hacked. Investigators believe the attack was intended to cause an explosion that would have killed many people. In contrast, the 2015 hack of the Office of Personnel Management, which gave Chinese hackers access to millions of records on US federal employees, is an example of cyber espionage. After the incident, then Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, said, quote, "You have to kind of salute the Chinese for what they did. If we had an opportunity to do that, I don't think we would have hesitated for a minute," unquote. Thus far, the 2020 hack by the Russian SVR is more like the Chinese hack of OPM in 2015. In other words, it's an example of cyber espionage. While there is no evidence thus far that any information in networks to which Russia got access has been deleted, destroyed, manipulated, or modified, what would happen if the fruits of this cyber espionage operation were used for a cyber attack? For example, could the Russians have placed cyber bombs into networks in which they had access that could be detonated remotely and cause physical destruction? Let's also return to the reported access to Microsoft's source code. Ronan Slavin of Cycode, a source code protection company, is worried about the possibility that the Russians are poring over Microsoft's source code as a prelude to a much more ambitious offensive. If engineers from Russia's SVR were able to modify that code, it could have disastrous consequences given the ubiquity of Microsoft products, which include the Office Productivity Suite and the Windows operating system. The standard computer system used by almost all agencies of the US federal government is the Microsoft Windows PC and the Microsoft Office software. I typed the text of this presentation in Microsoft Word, and the slides you are viewing were prepared using Microsoft PowerPoint. As a retired federal civil servant, I can assure you that if Microsoft Office goes offline, so does the whole US government. In response to the hack, President Biden has said this. Yesterday, President Biden addressed the cyber hack in his first call with Russia's President Vladimir Putin, a call the Russians described as, quote, businesslike and frank, unquote. Biden has also ordered the intelligence community to provide him with a comprehensive assessment of the hacking operation. There are a number of other actions the United States could take, from financial sanctions to attacks that cripple Russia's technology infrastructure. Although much of American offensive capabilities in cyberspace are highly classified, there is information suggesting the United States is already aggressively engaged, including the placement of potentially crippling malware inside Russia's power grid. But the United States must think through its options carefully because we are also vulnerable to cyber counterattacks. On March 15, 2018, the FBI and DHS released a report describing a massive Russian hacking campaign to infiltrate America's critical infrastructure, things like power plants, nuclear generators, and water facilities. The recent hack, which may well have involved leaving behind malicious code in our own systems, adds to the Russian ability to retaliate in kind to any offensive action by the United States. Thus, at the end of the day, defense, which already appears to be the weakest link in our cybersecurity effort, may be our only good option for preventing attacks and minimizing the impacts of those that are successful. Although too late to stop the Solarwinds hack, the FY21 National Defense Authorization Act, passed in December, contains 25 recommendations from last March's Blue Ribbon Cyberspace Solarium Commission report. Some of these include the usual inside baseball, such as reorganizing the government to successfully partner with the private sector to combat growing cyber threats and clarifying the rules and responsibilities of federal government agencies. But they also include several important new initiatives, such as the creation of the position of National Cyber Director within the Executive Office of the President. Biden has selected the experienced and highly regarded Ann Neuberger to serve in that position. Other recommendations include the establishment of an integrated cybersecurity center to better coordinate federal cybersecurity efforts and directs DHS to develop a strategy to strengthen security of all US-based email providers. Paul Colby, a former senior CIA official, reminds us that the United States is singularly vulnerable to cyber attack. America is more reliant on financial, commercial, and government networks than our adversaries, at the same time that those networks are frighteningly open and vulnerable to attack. The new Director of National Intelligence, Avril Haines, agrees, saying it is relatively easy for adversaries to hold at risk what are high-value assets to the United States, given how much we rely on cyber and digital work for our economy. This is among the reasons cybersecurity expert Bruce Schneier recommends that the United States adopt a defense-dominant strategy. The US should focus less on convincing adversaries not to conduct intelligence activities and more on making those efforts less successful. This means investing more in defense and information sharing and making it more difficult for threat actors to conduct both cyber espionage and cyber attacks. Finally, the importance of defense and resilience is underscored by this warning from another cyber expert, Lucian Constantine. It's worth remembering there's no such thing as impenetrable defenses when dealing with complex environments like enterprise networks. A sufficiently motivated and well-resourced attacker will eventually find a way. The goal of modern security programs is to minimize and manage risk, not eliminate it. And it's common to hear security experts say that it's a question of when, not if, you're going to get hacked. The important thing is to be prepared to handle such incidents as efficiently as possible and with a reasonably low impact to the organization. So I'm going to stop there and answer any questions that you have.
Okay, Mark, I'm going to take you off of the sharing so we can see everybody that's out there.
Okay.
See, that also means I probably want to move you out the spotlight. Okay. Okay, so let me start with the first question, if I might. In talking about this, you've talked as though the United States is the only country that's been affected. What are the international implications of this particular intrusion?
SolarWinds customers included companies outside the United States in 7 or 8 foreign countries. So they're affected as well.
Okay, are there any actions by them that would be of interest?
Well, they can complain to the Russians too. They're in much less strong position, but not completely. We cooperate a lot on things, and I'm going to refer to some very important work the Dutch have done to isolate Russian cyber hacking efforts. So having them on our side and kind of ganging up on the Russians and also using their resources, their own engineers and scientists is a very, very good thing. So this is a good question that you raise because it is not just the United States, it's not just Russia against us, but it's the Western alliance as a whole has basically been targeted, but particularly the U.S.
Judy, you've been monitoring the chat. Can you take us into a question or two?
Let's see, was NASA or the Department of Defense a target of the cyber espionage?
Yeah, I think I saw the question written. I think the person's question was whether NSA. Now, the answer there is probably not. NSA works almost entirely in the highly classified world. However, there were other Department of Defense unclassified systems that may have been compromised, particularly email. So that's very nerve-wracking. What was the other organization that you asked about?
Department of Defense.
Yeah, the Department of Defense, they're because many of the agencies of DoD, in fact, all of the services use SolarWinds software for some of their unclassified networks. So they were compromised for some amount of time.
Mark, I asked that question, and I did want to know about NASA. I wonder if they would have capability of interfering with the satellites that we have sent up there and maybe send them down to land on our cities?
That's a very, very good question. That is something they're going to have to look at. I do not know specifically if NASA was a customer of SolarWinds, but I can tell you that things that get into our control of satellites and things might have been in separate, more protected networks, but I don't know for sure. And none of my readings suggested that NASA, the National Space, Aerospace and Space Administration, was a target. I don't know the answer specifically if it was or not. I didn't see that whenever mentioned. So,
From Herbert Ristock, current source code management systems have strong protections against injecting malicious code from the outside. Is something known on how this happened at SolarWinds? For example, if GitHub was used, which is very popular in the industry.
okay, I don't know that. I don't have anything for you on that, Herb, because I'm not a computer scientist or IT professional. My background's in intelligence, counterintelligence, policy. So the only things I know on the technical aspect is if something that I read. The SolarWinds hack was not so much a hack of the source code itself. They just put malware into the software. So I'm talking about SolarWinds, not necessarily, Microsoft and the source code problem there. So that's what happened. They put some malware in there, and it was very cleverly placed because it did allow them, the SVR, to poke around in the systems of people that were compromised for a fairly long period of time. But I'm sorry, I don't have the technical knowledge to address your other specific question.
Mark, can I add something about it? I was actually working in software development for many years, and I know that the software development production process has a lot of protection built in against this happening. That means if, for example, this is why I mentioned GitHub. If GitHub was compromised, then this could be an issue for many software companies, because many of them are using GitHub. Also other technologies that are used in production chain, most of it is kind of automated, and it's very difficult to inject something from the outside. Therefore, it would be really good to learn more on the technical details, because this might be helpful for other companies as well.
No question. I mentioned GitHub in the context of the fact that many passwords of SolarWinds employees were compromised on GitHub. Not so much a GitHub problem, but some other, bad security practices by users of GitHub. So I'm not suggesting, I don't know to what extent GitHub had been targeted or there was any kinds of vulnerabilities in their system, only that SolarWinds employee passwords had been compromised. So that was where the GitHub part came in.
Mark, what degree of confidence do you have that it will be possible to determine all of the residual bombs or whatever that have been left behind by the intrusion?
You know, that's an important question. I think the answer is, with enough time, we will be able to do a pretty thorough, the collective we, meaning all of the government agencies and all the cybersecurity specialists they will employ to do this, will be able to figure out and give a pretty good damage assessment. But at the end of the day, the only way you can for sure or be sure that your network is not still has not still been penetrated, that they still don't have a backdoor into your network, is to tear it down completely and rebuild from scratch. I don't know that most companies are going to be able to afford to do that. I don't even know if the US federal government's going to be able to do that. I don't even know how much they're going to publicly talk about that, because that would tip the Russians off as to what we're doing in response. I think you would have to spend a lot of time in the industry literature, watch the websites and news things that focus on the technical side of this, and they might reveal some information about it. But I think eventually, but it's not going to be right away, we're going to get a fairly good handle on the damage, and it's not going to be pretty.
Okay, Gabriel, did you want to ask your question? I guess not. Okay, are there technological options for separate isolated internet networks that would be much more defensible? So that's called an air gap between the systems and the internet.
Yeah, that's how the United States, protects its classified networks. There is a very big, what you call an air gap between our classified systems and those that operate, and are accessible to the internet. So, those are kind of, the classified systems are kind of closed systems. What was the question was, how confident was I in what part of it? I didn't.
Gabriel?
Just what options there were to set up networks that would be more defensible.
In the unclassified realm?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a problem because, essentially the government has to be able to work. It supports the public. It has to be able to work in that environment. It has to be able to communicate with private sector companies and other individuals. And so from a practical standpoint, I don't think that can be done. Rather, I think they need to, continue strong defensive measures to detect intrusions. It needs to be, a lot of little things are just educating the users so that things like these phishing emails are not activated. That's one of the common ways that agencies and private sector companies have been compromised, is just because their employees were sloppy, opened an email, or they didn't change their passwords regularly, things like that. But that's one part of it, but there's more sophisticated systems that can be done there. I would be the wrong person to go beyond that, to ask about more specifically how to do that, because again, I'm not an IT professional.
We've had a couple of questions, Mark, about how individuals can protect themselves. And I'd like to kick off from your last comment. The number one way is that you cannot trust emails. If you are asked to do something that seems at all questionable, you go directly to the website of the entity you're working with. You don't open emails.
Yeah, what I do, and I'm sure most of you already know this, is I take my cursor and put it over the address from which the email comes from. 99% of the time, it is blatantly obvious that it's a bogus email, and you can just delete it right off the bat. Occasionally, the email might look like it could have conceivably come from Bank of America or Google. But anytime you get an email that asks you to click on something to change your password or give your credentials, that's almost certainly no good, because companies don't do that. They have other ways if they think you're compromised. But believe me, they're pretty clever. I just, with respect to emails, last week, I got a note from Yahoo that it looked like somebody was trying to get into my system, and Yahoo didn't say click here to do things. They just gave me that information, and they said go to, log into your account and you should change your password. Well, what I learned was there had been an attempt by someone in Israel to change the recovery email and phone number for my account. Now, how they were able to even get in that far, but if they had that information, the recovery email, then that would allow somebody to say that they forgot their password, pretending to be me, and then they would have the Yahoo would then send the way to change your password to the recovery email, which would not be my email, but this guy in Israel. So I was changing emails, and I changed them twice, and I changed the recovery email. And then eventually at the end of all this, I think I was okay. I got an email from Yahoo that says, we think that you may have been the target of state-sponsored hackers from Israel, and that you may wish to, I don't know, they didn't really give me a lot of advice other than pay attention and change your emails. So they may be in, maybe not. If any of you, my friends, get strange emails asking for money with my name on it, you might want to let me know, because that could be the Israelis asking, some hacking, criminal syndicates. There's criminal syndicates in Russia and Eastern Europe and Israel, in the United States. They're all over.
Mark, this used to be a world you worked in. We know that everything can't be the top priority. How important would this be right now if you were still in the DHS kind of world?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's probably among the 2 or 3 biggest threats that we face that are not direct military threats, and because we are, as some of those quotes that I gave you, so dependent on our networks, and we use them so extensively, the damage that can be done can be really, really significant. And so protecting those networks is absolutely a critical priority. And I think that this hack is going to kind of wake up the community, but it's not a wake-up call the way, let's say, the 9/11 attacks were, which everybody could really relate to and get upset about. This is stuff that flies on, it's technical, it flies under the radar. It's hard for individuals to see how they are directly affected in the day-to-day work they do. But companies that of course, rely on networks to do the work that they do are very, very concerned. I can tell you that Microsoft, for example, is probably spending millions scouring its networks from top to bottom, and which is good, and they can afford it. Their quarterly sales last quarter, I just read, went up 17%, and their stock price went up almost $3 today. So that's enough money for them to get after there and do some security.
Mark,
Here's a question. Okay.
Something like this cuts across many different government agencies. How does the government, as it should run, manage a problem like this that cuts across agencies?
Okay, that's a good question, because this is another one of these where each agency tends to want to do their own thing, and they don't always want to share information, or they want to kind of, so what you have is this kind of different silos. DOD's doing this, Energy's doing that, Treasury's doing this. the department that's given the responsibility for cybersecurity protection is the Department of Homeland Security. But it's also the department that has suffered the most in the last few years in lack of leadership. And DHS is a fairly new department created after 9/11, as you know, and it doesn't always have the same respect, or as I like to put it, it sits at the far end of the cabinet table. I, you know, at my little low level would go into some meetings, you know, NSC meetings, and, you know, they really weren't that interested in what we had to say about anything. You know, it was the big players were Justice, FBI, DOD, State Department. DHS, as I said, yeah, they were just kind of a puny thing. But DHS has been given this responsibility, and if they are going to do the job that needs to be done across the government, enterprise-wide, then they have to be given the authority and the resources to do so.
Okay. Judy, any other question we want to attack before we wrap it up?
Which congressional committees are overseers, and are you aware of the members' expertise in those committees?
Another great question. The answer is that DHS reports to multiple committees, and that's another problem. Because DHS is a collection of different activities, but under cybersecurity, the cybersecurity elements and so forth, there's a few committees that are involved. But, you know, if you're trying to tell DOD, you know, how to manage some of its networks, you're now getting into the Armed Services Committee's domain. And if you tell State Department how to run its business, and you're getting into Foreign Affairs Committee. So this is another problem, is who exercises the oversight and calls the shots.
Okay, Mark, I cannot thank you enough for an outstanding introduction. And it's understandable, although a little bit terrifying in its own measure. A reminder to everybody that this Sunday at 10:30 is our next symposium lecture, and that will involve two people involved in regional media, talking about how regional media can survive in this modern world of ours. We'll see you then. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks.
Great job.